Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 7 of 10 Minutes of Wisdom. And I'm very excited for today's podcast because we have Victor Perton with us. And Victor is a industry veteran. His career has spanned from being a commissioner to Americas. He's a parliamentarian, barrister, arbiter. He's board member to some of the very critical infrastructure companies in Australia regarding water utilities and others. So I'm really privileged to have him. But of all his experience, I think what struck most with me was his project that is Center for Optimism. And that's where I want his inputs, like, because in cyber field, and my other fellow leaders or colleagues in cyber industry would know, like, cyber can be a very stressful work because hackers have to be just right one time, and it sets very fog of pessimism around our work sometimes. So so and I feel that what Victor is doing can really help cyber leaders be that, take them to the next level, because it is not only about the technical skill sets but how you can rally your group or leadership together. So without taking much of your time, I would just like to thank Victor for being in this podcast. And my first question to him was, like, just in his own words, he wants to talk something about him. And I really want to know about what is this Center for Optimism project that he is really working on.
Oh, that's nearly beyond the time limit we've
Yeah.
got. But
Yeah.
it started out of a bemusement when I came back to Australia in 2015 around the negativity of language
Okay.
and negativity towards leadership. I'm
Okay.
not talking about political leadership. Every country mocks its political leaders. But here, there seemed to be this cynicism towards leadership, people not taking up leadership roles. And so I started off with a project called the Australian Leadership Project, where we interviewed 2,500 people on the qualities of Australian leadership.
Mm.
And, we had Harvard, INSEAD, others, and the conclusion at the end was Australian leadership is very good in global terms, characterized by three things, which you have experienced: egalitarianism. You
Mhm.
have to talk to the cleaner with the same respect as the managing director. Self-effacing humor, we laugh at ourselves. And then no bullshit. Now, at that point, we worked out, well, why are people so negative? Because there's a lot of people with those qualities. And my eureka moment came in late 2017 when I was on the final panel of the Global Integrity Summit. And after 3 days of misery and pessimism and angst and fear, and I changed my speech to the case for optimism. And it electrified the room, and people suggested I turn it into a book, and that started a global speaking tour. And then a year later, serendipity caused me to found the Centre for Optimism, and we have 8,500 subscribers in 82 countries. And as you'll see on the screen above me, the fundamental question we ask people is, what makes you optimistic?
Mhm.
So may I ask you, what makes you optimistic?
So, what makes me optimistic for my professional perspective is, I think I'm working in a space, cyber, which is very critical for for the world, global world going ahead. And even if I can make small dent in this entire massive thing, it makes me really charged up, motivated. And that's why such podcast and such initiatives I take on my own, because I'm very optimistic that we can help the world in a better way.
I can share a funny story. Last week I was in Canberra and I was in the queue for coffee at Aussies, and in front of me was a military officer. And I said to him, "Oh, what's brought you joy today?" And he looked at me and he said, "Oh, I'm in cybersecurity. We don't think in that way." And I said to him, "Well, look, I just want to thank you. It's people like you that make it possible for people like me to use the internet, to communications, to be empowered by artificial intelligence." And he smiled at me and he said, "I've never thought about it that way."
Yeah. Mm.
And so if we can bring optimism and joy
Yep.
and leadership skills to the people in your profession,
Yeah.
then you and I will have done something very good with this podcast.
Yes, definitely. Because generally, cyber leaders or CISOs are looked at people always saying, no, oh, this is a security, this can lead to a security breach. Don't do this, don't do that. So, and sometimes what happens as a CISO or a head of a security, your habit becomes of saying a no, whereas
Mm,
the true goal of a cyber security is to be a business enabler. So
mm,
your goal is how you can enable the business securely and they can grow. So rather than, so with this attitude, what I have experienced is when you say, like, even as a cybersecurity expert, if you say no, but if you're optimistic, you give them alternate solutions, like how you can still achieve that business direction or your goals or your dreams, but how you can tailor make or fine tune in a more secure way. And that's where it leads to optimistic behavior, because a cybersecurity professional who is clouded with fog of pessimism that he will get breached, if he just keeps on saying no, then there is no end. Only a shutdown computer is safe, as they say. So it's going to add no productivity to anyone.
no, you're exactly right on that.
Yep,
And words like, so we always say what you want to be is infectiously optimistic.
yep,
And um, one of the really senior global business people said to me, every great leader he's ever met is infectiously optimistic. But it's not the speech from the podium or the rah-rah from the boss.
yep,
It's the boss who can find out what makes the team
mm,
optimistic,
yep,
can do, innovative, strategic, resilient,
yep.
open to change. And if I give you a little example, I did a project for a company that was trying to get people back into the office.
Okay.
And we were going around the circle on Teams, and one lady said, "Oh, my garden and my pets."
Mm,
And of course, we all thought then she doesn't want to come back to the office.
mm,
But to cut a long story short, um, her boss afterwards said to me, "Do you know, I've never talked to this woman about her garden or her pets.
mm,
All I ever talk to her about is inputs and outputs." And
yep,
so that question that I have there, what makes you optimistic?
yep,
At your next team meeting, I recommend you put that top of the agenda. And
yep,
it's not what makes you optimistic about work, it's
yep,
what makes you optimistic, whether it's God or family,
yep,
life experience, natural optimism. You
yep,
need to understand what energizes and motivates your team. So, the number one suggestion I would have for your viewers,
yep,
next meeting on the agenda, what makes you optimistic? And
mm,
and put in the definition of optimism, a
yep,
belief that good things will happen and that things will work out in the end. And if you
yep,
do that every month or every 3 months at your team meetings, you will
yep.
have a stronger and more powerful and more motivated team.
Yeah. And in today's cyber world, I feel that this is very important because there is a lot of lack of skill sets, and because of the stress of the job, if you see, there is a lot of iterations, or there are people leaving, like they are CISOs in a one company for 2 years and then leaving and becoming CISOs for another company because of the stress level, and so is happening on the lower leadership also. So what
Hmm?
I think this is what you're saying, because what you're saying is actually resonating well with me, because I have read somewhere that though humans act to be creatures of logic, like everything is logical, but actually we are driven by emotions. We are actually true creatures of emotions. Like if emotions are high, we can do unexpected things which can take the human race really forward. So that's actually a great lesson that you have given me, and I will definitely try this with my team when I meet them
It
next.
was interesting. The famous economist Kahneman died recently, and one of his great quotes was,
Mm,
"All great human achievements have come from people with unrealistic optimism." So
true.
while we can foster realistic optimism, we want the people who can
Mm,
believe they can do something superhuman. And if we
true.
come back to what the benefits of generating greater optimism for yourself and your team, for being infectiously optimistic, or I call it magnetically optimistic, you will live
Mm,
longer. The science says optimism is the key trait in healthy longevity. It
yes.
says that optimism is the key trait in successful relationships. The worker of the 2020s is yearning for infectious optimism. It underpins strategy. You can't do strategy if you're not
True.
an optimist. Pessimists can't do innovation.
True.
Only optimists can do innovation. If you want
That's true.
innovative
So
people,
true.
you have to recruit optimists.
True. True.
Resilience depends on persistence beyond the ordinary. And
Yeah.
so you can't be resilient unless you're optimistic. And you can't do change and transformation projects unless you generate optimism in the team and the stakeholders. So it's not just, like the boss at Telstra now, I'm going to sack 9% of people to
Yep.
make the company better.
Exactly.
Everyone else is listening to her and thinking, bullshit, I might
Yep.
be losing my job next. How is
Yep.
she going to generate a better company by sacking 9% of the workforce?
Yep, yep. That's actually a great lesson for the executive leaders. So I think one of the best. Also, I was doing a lot of research on your profile. So I also saw that you have been the senior engagement advisor for the G20 presidents, Australian G20 presidency, and that's a huge deal, right? And I think even the Prime Minister commented that this is the most important gathering that Australia has ever conducted. So, do you want to share your experiences on optimism and overall your feedback of that entire piece that you did and lessons for younger
Yeah.
guys like us?
Yeah, look, I think for me, the most important thing in engagement is number one, smile and say hello to everyone. For me, whether it was the Russian finance minister or if people want to Google it, they'll find a
Yeah,
picture of me and Jacob Zuma.
yeah,
It doesn't matter what the world is thinking of them at the time. My job was engagement. And the G20 in particular, it's not a majority vote.
yeah,
Everything has to be done by unanimity.
yep,
So whether it's the Russians or the Chinese or the Brazilians or the French or the Germans or the Saudis,
yep,
everything in the communique has to be consensus. So
yep,
I really found, so I found earlier working in America that
mhm,
Americans generally love Australians, and they love
yeah,
Australians because they think we're relentless optimists.
yes,
The chairman of Caterpillar said to me, "You Aussies remind me of the Americans of 100 years ago. Nothing is impossible."
yep,
What the G20 proved to me was at the super elite level
yep,
of presidents and prime ministers and finance ministers, there's this incredible joy in
mm-hmm,
being with Australians.
mm-hmm,
They trust Australians. And part of my job was helping to organize and host the events. And,
yep,
we opened up, our first event was to showcase Australia
yep,
with the finance ministers and the central bank governors having a barbecue at the Governor General's residence
yep,
overlooking Circular Quay, in
nice,
Sydney, that beautiful environment.
beautiful,
And again, it was Australian hospitality, a barbecue, Australian red wine and sparkling wine. It was the kids from the Australian Girls Choir were
yep,
on the steps singing as people came in.
yep,
And so what I really learned, it doesn't matter what sort of person or seniority you are, you
yep,
want a little bit of joy. You want some
true,
happiness in your work. You
yep,
want a cheerful smile from people. And
true,
one thing I've learned over the last 5 years of research is
yep,
I've got rid of the question, how are you? Because most
okay,
people answer it instinctively.
yep,
The thing I'd like to ask your viewers
yeah,
is for the next 2 days, don't say g'day, how are you? Because
yeah,
the typical answer is not bad or not too bad. Where does that
yeah,
take you?
yep,
So
yeah,
just say hello or g'day. What's been the best thing in your day?
okay,
If your
yep,
listeners can do that, come back and tell you about it,
yep,
that they will find people, 50% of people will immediately say, I
yep,
smelt the roses, I went for a run, I had success,
yep,
putting a new patch on our system, we withstood an attack from the North Koreans. 30% of people will need a little prompter.
yep,
You'll say, oh, well, did you have a nice cup of coffee or did you get out in the sun? And then
yep,
20% of people are probably having a bad day. And if they
yep,
actually say to you, oh, I'm not actually having anything good, a
yep,
question, a problem shared is a problem halved.
ha,
So the real challenge to your viewers for the
yep,
next 2 days,
yep,
walking down the street, walking down the corridor, Don't read messages, don't write messages. Look at everyone, smile and just say hello.
Yep.
And then number two is change your greeting. Walk into your next meeting and you say, what's been the best thing in your day so far? You will get an extraordinary reaction. I walked into Deakin University last Thursday, and the receptionist said, g'day, how are you? And I said, look, thank you for asking. I'm really well. Tell me what's been the best thing in your day. And there were three other senior people near her desk. They all looked up. And I said, gosh, that's a good question.
Yes, definitely does.
I've got lots of tips and tricks on being an optimistic leader, but those two are number one and two. Smile and say hello to everyone, and then change your greeting to include what's been the best thing in your day. The other day I was walking in Box Hill from the town hall to the tram. All 9 people I passed were, telephone in front of them. And each one I loudly said, good morning, I hope you're having a good day. And 8 out of the 9 gave me this big smile and repeated that back to me. But they weren't going to start it. Only the superhero like you, who can take up this cause, is the one that's going to lift this world, lift their workplace, and lift their team. If you can every day start your first conversation with one of your cyber team members, what's been the best thing in your day, you are going to have a wonderful day.
That's an amazing note for us to end this podcast, because that's exactly basically the cliff on which I want all my viewers to be there, like on the top of it, and see that what a beautiful view you can see if you're optimistic, even in cyber, where you are always threatened with threat actors and all those things. So that's amazing podcast. I think one of the best. Victor, thanks for your time, and thanks for being so
That's
kind.
right. Can I just remind you and your listeners, optimism is a state of mind, not a state of the world, right? Stuff can be going wrong, right? There was a famous mystic in the 13th century, in the middle of the Black Plague, who said, all shall be well. All shall be well. All manner of things shall be well. If I may use a swear word, it doesn't matter what shit you guys are in. It's going to work out in the end if you keep your head and keep your smile.
Definitely. Definitely. I think that's the best note to end this podcast. Thanks a lot, Victor. Thanks for your time.
Pleasure.
Thank you.